Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. Beautiful day outside. And we'll be turning in our Bibles to the fifth book of Moses, the book of Deuteronomy. And we'll be picking up in chapter 13. And where we're at, if you'll remember, last time we was together and reading in Deuteronomy, that Moses continues to review what they're to do once they go into the land of milk and honey, which is going to be on the other side of the Jordan River, of course. And we're in a point in time in Israel's history where God has saved their previous generation from sinful Egypt, delivered them out of that, and now they're going to the promised land, the new generation is, and that's who Moses is speaking to. And of course, that period of time has been 40 years in the making, and it's probably a good time of review for these people, this new generation, because in their journey from Egypt to now, they haven't always been able to do everything that God had commanded that they be done. You know, if you'll remember back in Exodus and the laws and the practices that they were to follow. And as you'll see when we get over into Joshua, circumcision was one of them. It kind of was something that God had recommended they do, back in Abraham's time and forward there. And just the circumstances, of where they've been, or not Abraham, but back when they left Egypt. But the circumstances being out in the wilderness and all that kind of got neglected, and we'll read that in Joshua when we get on there. And there was other things it was hard for them to do too, just because of their circumstances of where they're at. So this is a good time. Moses is reviewing what they're going to have to do when they get into the promised land. And you would think, this kind of come to my heart when I was reading one time this week. You would think that going into a land that floweth with milk and honey, and that land was like that when these Canaanites was there and arrived. And you would think that to be blessed, even though they were Canaanites and pagans, heathens, and all that they are, you would think that when you live in a place that it was bountiful as the land of milk and honey, and food was in abundance, that would make a good people. I mean, and that comes to my heart. You think when life is that easy, you would have the opportunity to be good people. You think they would be thankful, but they weren't. Man, it was right the opposite. They lived in a beautiful land that floweth with milk and honey, and they were terrible, horrible people. And we know that from God's word here and what Moses is warning the Israelites as they going in there. And if you take the time, if you have a child, and these were God's children, you want to warn your child of impending danger. You want to tell them about what's going to happen. And that's what Moses is doing here. And God, through Moses, is telling these people, you're going to a beautiful land, but you need to obey me and not fall over to idolatry and worshiping false gods and all the terrible things that follow that, because it's a real hazard. It's a real problem that these people can succumb to once they're in that bountiful land. And you would think, man, it's not been but 40 years since their mom and dads left Egypt, that, man, they should go into the land of the milk and honey and everything would be beautiful and perfect and they would worship God every day and think about God constantly. But Moses is warning them, if you don't watch it, you're going to fall just like these Canaanites have become in this beautiful land. So that's where we're at. And it must be really important for God, through Moses, to tell these people that this is what's going to happen. And we know, all this is in history. And a lot of you have read the book of Kings and the book of Joshua and things that's to come in. And it's going to turn out to be a real problem for God's children once they get there. Even though they've been warned. We'll read that in the future. All right? So here in chapter 13, we're going to see how much idolatry God is willing to accept. And what I mean by that is there's going to be some punishments that he recommends that when they fall into idolatry. So it's going to be a real problem here. So I'm going to read verses 1 through 3 of chapter 13. I had to borrow Leah's Bible. I know y'all think I'll get through this, but I left my Bible and my notes at work Friday. And I remembered them about halfway home. So I may forget a little bit this morning, but I'm hoping I've got a good bit here to do it. All right, 1 through 3, chapter 13, the heading of this, false prophets to be destroyed. So they're even going to have problems with false prophets when they go into this land. You know, Moses is not going to give them a warning of something that ain't a problem. And if you know, we kind of already met Balaam in the previous chapters and him foretelling the future. And that's what we're going to see here, these signs and wonders we read about. This is not going to be just like little miracles and things. I mean, they're going to try to, they're not going to try. These false prophets can and will predict the future. But we're going to read right here in the coming verses, don't be fooled, because even though they're predicting something in the future, if they ain't got their walk don't match their talk, you don't need to heed it. You don't need to pay attention to it, is what Moses is telling them. And that's something that's going to happen in the future for us, you know, if we live long enough, even in the future beyond what we're reading here in the Old Testament. That's really, and you know, even back in Egypt, you know, when Moses was predicting, when Moses was there and God was performing the miracles in Egypt, if you remember the Pharaoh's false prophets there, or sorcerers or whatever, they were able to perform miracles then. It seemed like miracles then. And so don't be surprised, you know. And this is a warning from Moses to them. Chapter 13, verse 1. If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or wonder. Like I said, that's predicting the future of things to come. If he can, you know, tell what's going to happen and all that. And the sign or the wonder come to pass. And if it comes to pass, is what Moses, it will come to pass. Don't be fooled here. It's going to happen. Whereof he spake unto thee, saying, let us go after other gods which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. That's what I meant by if the walk's got to match the talk. Now, if they give a false prophet there, it gives a prediction of the future, and he uses it for the means of them to trying to worship false gods, that is not the way it's going to be. Do not heed it. Do not follow it. That's what he's telling them. Verse 3, thou shalt not hearken. That's don't listen. They shall not listen unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God proveth you to know whether you love the Lord God with all your heart and with all your soul. So that'll be, you know, that'll be a sign, you know, that they don't need, if it don't match the talk, they're not to go with it, and God's going to know the difference right there. I mean, they don't need to do that. All right. Verse 4. Ye shall walk after the Lord your God. See, it's even there, plain and simple. Walk with the talk. Walk with God. Walk with your God and fear him. And that's not to be just scared to death of God. That is a awe. That is a fear of awe and respect, is what Moses is telling them. Don't be scared, but have respect and awe for God. All right? And keep his commandments. That's obey. And obey his voice, and ye shall serve him and cleave unto him. So we got 6 things here Moses is telling them. They got to walk with God, they got to fear God, keep, that's observe his commandments, obey, that was to hearken, listen to, and serve and cleave and draw close to God. That's what they're supposed to do all the time. And if they're doing that, they're not going to have a problem with identifying these false prophets too, if you think about it. It will be plain as day. It will be plain as day. If they do those 6 things right there listed in that next verse, they won't have any problem being fooled by the false prophet. All right? Verse 5. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death. Well, there's how much. That's what when I first started this, we'll see how much idolatry God's willing to accept. With that punishment, I think the statement is pretty plain. that God is a jealous God, and he don't want these people worshiping these false gods. So here's the sentence. That dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy God commanded thee to walk in. So shalt you put the evil away from the midst of thee. So that's self-explanatory. Like I said, no acceptance by God for that. I'm going to read verses 6 through 11. If thy brother, the son of thy mother, or thy son, or thy daughter, or the wife of thy bosom, or thy friend, which is as thine own soul, entice thee secretly, saying, Let us go and serve other gods which thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers, namely of the gods of the people which are round about you, nigh unto thee, or far off from thee, from the one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. Thou shalt not consent unto him, nor hearken unto him. Don't listen to him. Neither shall thine eye pity him. Neither shalt thou spare, neither shalt thou conceal him. But thou shalt surely kill him. And that's not just like immediately just draw back and hit them over the head. You know, there's going to be a circumstance where they take that probably to the gate, and then that's decisioned out. Because what have we learned in the previous chapters? In order for someone to pass sentence on somebody with a death penalty, you had to have the witness, of course, but it always had to be backed up with another person. You see, so we're going to see that ain't just like I said, when somebody made that, you don't just haul off and kill them right then, is what it is. But anyway, there again, the message here is God's acceptance of idolatry and worshiping other gods. The penalties are severe. It is awful offense against God. It's the first commandment. Thou shalt not worship no other gods. So that's where we're at. Let me finish these verses. Verse 10, And thou shalt stone him with stones that he die, because he has sought to thrust thee away from the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. And all Israel shall hear and fear, and shall do no more any such wickedness as this among you. So again, that seems far-fetched, but it's a real possibility that could happen when they get over into the promised land. So they're being warned that this is going to happen. And, that's if you think about that, a lot of times when people are exposed to doing things wrong, it's usually kind of behind the scenes, or somebody whispering in somebody's ear and saying, you can do this and can do that, and this would be better to do this. So, that's kind of the way the world works, and that's a warning from God. All right, now I'm going to read verses 12 through 18. All right, Israel to destroy idolatrous cities, and you're like, man, the whole city can go bad. Yes, it can, and it had been going on. I got thinking about this too. We're thinking this was going on. Egypt, of course, was an idolatrous city, and when they left, the nations were divided up, and they left Babylon, and they all went to different places. And you hear in Canaan, you got these cities of idolatry, and it's everywhere. Down in what we call Saudi Arabia now, you had some of the Midianites. But when it really came to mind, if you think about it, when Abraham left Ur, and that was an idolatrous area over there altogether in Babylon, and all that. But that's Sodom and Gomorrah. When they come into that valley, that whole city had corrupted so bad that we know what happened to that. So it's a real problem. Cities can become completely corrupt, and they can't find a handful of people worth saving in it. It can happen. Okay, so that's what we're getting a warning here. If thou shalt hear say in one of the cities which the Lord thy God hath given thee to dwell there, saying, certain men, the children of Belial, are gone out from among you. And that's just that is worthless men. Kind of just worthless men. These worthless men have gone out from among you, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods which ye have not known. These worthless men obviously are going to have some type of influence over the people to get them to do this. So this is not just going to be some crazy man or some man that lives in a cave and nobody listens to. I mean, these worthless men are able to convince people in the whole city to start living in a terrible way. That's where they're at. All right, so thou shalt inquire and make search, and that's seek out, find the truth, and ask diligently, and behold, if it be truth, and the thing certain that such an abomination is wrought among you, and it's going to be obvious. I mean, when they search it out and they find that word and they see that, it's going to be just like Sodom was. I mean, you pull into the town there and want to spend the night at somebody's house, and they're trying to beat the door down to take advantage of you. It's pretty obvious. It's going to be bad. So thou shalt surely smite the inhabitants. There again, zero. That's the real zero tolerance. If you want to get back to the term zero tolerance from back then, because it's that bad. Y'all shall surely smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroying it utterly, and all that is therein. And it just comes to mind right there. And that sounds harsh. Zero tolerance by the sword. But how much evil and wickedness can they allow? How much evil and wickedness can they allow in their homes, in their towns? Will it ever just quit it a little? It grows, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows. So it has to be eliminated. It's either that or succumb to it over time. And, here's the warning. And anyway, once the seed is destroyed, therein the cattle of and the edge of the sword. Verse 16, and thou shalt gather all the spoil of it in the midst, and that's the things that are left over, the physical goods and stuff. It's in the town once all the inhabitants are destroyed, and shall burn with fire the city and all the spoil thereof, every whit for the Lord thy God, and it shall be a heap forever. It shall not be built again. And there again, a little bit of evil, you would think people would want to take all the spoils and take them back home with you. But like common sense says, who wants to take advantage and take something home with them that they know that was gotten, or it was built up, it was accumulated from evil and wickedness? Could you really take that home and feel good about yourself, knowing that all the spoils of that town was built and accumulated from the backs of the helpless and the weak? No. And God tells them to burn it to the ground. Don't take none of it. All right? And there shall cleave not, verse 17, and there shall cleave not of the cursed thing to thine hand, that the Lord may turn from the fierceness of his anger and show thee mercy and have compassion upon thee and multiply thee as he has sworn unto thy fathers. There again, this whole book of Deuteronomy so far has been obey God and be blessed. And there we see it again. And when thou shalt hearken, listen to the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep all his commandments, which I command thee this day, to do that which is right in the eyes of the Lord thy God. Obeying equals blessing. Now, on to chapter 14. Of course, more guidance from God. I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. And this starts out some practices of the Canaanites. Evidently them, and I think even Egypt and other parts of the world, when they had their process of mourning for the dead, they had somehow adapted or drawn to themselves some physical way of cutting and punishing and marking themselves when they were mourning their dead. And that is not the way it's going to be with God's people. Remember, he has, throughout this book of Deuteronomy, he has told them, you are to be set apart. You are not to be like the rest of the world. And this here mourning the dead is another example that they're not supposed to do. It's like self-hurting themselves and mourning the dead. But anyway, that's where we're at. And I'm going to read 1 and 2, chapter 14. Ye are the children of the Lord. And that there again, the children of God. And that I relate to that because I've had my own children. I got my own children. And I start to see why Moses is telling them that they're God's children. There's a relationship there. And you love your children. You want to take care of them. You want to warn them. You want to protect them. And you want them to do well. You want them to be blessed. So here's God going with it. And ye shall not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. There again, that's some of them physical practices that I was talking about. For thou art a holy people. Holy, that's to be set apart. And they're not to go around looking like their faces is all cut and marked up and, God don't want his people to look like that, his children to look like that as he's moving forward. So he's telling them they need to be holy and be set apart. Thy God and the Lord hath chosen thee, his children, to be a peculiar, and that peculiar people unto himself above all nations upon the earth. Now, if they're going to obey God and do the things that God said, the result is they are going to be set apart, they're going to look different, and they're going to be blessed. And that's going to be a big difference. And this peculiar is not that they're going to look odd or weird, but they're going to be a unique treasure, is what that, if you go back and look, that's how that breaks down the meaning of it is. They're to be a unique treasure. They'll be like a big diamond in a ring, in a set or something. They're going to be set apart. They're going to look better. They're going to do better if they obey God. And that's what they're supposed to do. Now I'm going to read 3 through 21. A lot of reading here, so get back and sit back and we'll just listen and we'll get through this one. And this is regarding clean and unclean meat. And, we've reviewed this back in the previous books, but a little bit of something here I'll bring to the point right quick. Let me read these. Thou shalt not eat any abominable thing. And remember, clean and unclean is what we're breaking down here, the clean and unclean animals. And if you'll remember, unclean in the practices is always associated with death. The things associated with death, and then life are the clean things. So this is a division. It's been determined by God. And before I read this, I'll go ahead and talk about it. And you think, well, I think that was back in Exodus or Leviticus whenever we talked about all the clean and unclean animals and the practices, and they go out of the camp when they touch the dead body and all that. But this clean and unclean is not just a recent thing, if you think about it. Now, how many animals did Noah bring on the ark of each type? Trivia question. Yeah, 2's partly right. Two of the unclean, right? 7 of the clean, right? So think about that. That was way back in the time of Noah. That clean and unclean had already been determined back then. So it's not a new thing that these people are aware of. It's something that's been around for a long time. So, and there was something we talked about here, but I can't think of it right now. But there's some things that's been established, just like the Sabbath. That's what it was. On the seventh day, God rested, if you remember. And then here we in the law, we're going to have sabbatical, the Sabbath days to be worshiped. And we're in a chapter coming up, every 7th year is a sabbatical year. So that 7 years, that goes way back when. So this stuff, it's been established a long time with God when you go back in to see. It's just really amazing how far back the things of God do go back when you look at it. But anyway, let me get through this 21 right quick. Read these and just sit back and listen. All right, verse 4. And these are the beasts which ye shall eat, the ox, the sheep, and the goat. Verse 5. The hart, the roebuck, and the fallow deer, and the wild goat, and the pygarg, and the wild ox, and the chamois, and every beast that parteth the hoof, and cleaveth the cleft into 2 claws, and cheweth the cud among the beasts that ye shall eat. Nevertheless, these ye shall not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the cloven hoof, as the camel, and the hare, and the coney, for they chew the cud, but divideth not the hoof. Therefore they are unclean unto you. And the swine, because it divideth the hoof, yet cheweth not the cud, it is unclean unto you, and ye shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass. 9, these ye shall eat of all that are in the waters, and have fins and scales shall ye eat, and whatsoever hath not fins and scales you may not eat, it is unclean to you. The birds, this is verse 11, of all the clean birds ye shall eat, but these are they of which ye shall not eat: the eagle, and the ossifrage, and the osprey, and the gledy, and the kite, and the vulture after his kind, and every raven after his kind, and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the cuckoo, and the hawk after his kind. the little owl and the great owl and the swan, and the pelican and the gear eagle and the cormorant, and the stork and the heron after her kind, and the lapwing and the bat. And every creeping thing that flieth is unclean to you, they shall not be eaten. But of all clean fowls ye may eat, and ye shall not eat of anything that dieth of itself. Thou shalt give it unto the stranger that is in thy gates, that he may eat it, or thou may sell it unto an alien, for thou art the holy people unto the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in its mother's milk. I'll stop on that one a little bit. From what I could gather, nobody knows exactly sure what the practice might have been with that seething the kid in the mother's milk. But what I did read kind of made sense to me with common sense. Is to do that is kind of like it's not really have respect for life, to create life, a newly created life, and then do that to it in the mother, which was part of creating it. It just kind of don't feel right. It don't sound right to me. So, and that's kind of the way when I was reading one study and kind of come to that conclusion on that. But, and let's see. Yeah, 3 through 21. Is that where I got to that. So, yeah, no respect for new life or that which gives it. That's the way I summarized that in my notes. And that's just the kind of way that seems right there. All right. Now I'm going to read 22. Yeah, verse 22. All right. All right, laws regarding tithing. And thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed that the field bringeth forth year by year. And that's more demands more. And to me, there again, that is common sense. God blesses them with more, they're to give more. All right? And that goes all the way back to, there again, that's another one of them old, tithing is not new, just like we talked about the other things, the Sabbath and so forth. If you remember, that goes all the way back to Abraham and Melchizedek when they met there. There was a tithe offered there. So this is not something that's new to God. It's a practice that's been going on a long time. Now I'm going to read 23 through 26. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, the tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, and thine oil, and the firstlings of thy herds and the flocks. Thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. And if the way be too long for thee, so that thou shalt not be able to carry it, or if the place be too far from thee, which the Lord thy God shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord God hath blessed thee. If I go on to 26, yeah, hang on. 25. Thou shalt turn it into money, and bind up the money in thine hand, and shalt go into the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for oxen, for sheep, for wine, strong drink, or whatever the soul desireth, and thou shalt eat there before the Lord God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thine household. Again, here we got one place chosen by God to worship. That's what, this is to be determined by God, and they could use money if, let's say it was time to take the offering, to go to the tabernacle, the temple, or whatever it is in the point in time in the future. They could take money and take it, because they might not always be able to get the crop or the animal offering to that place. So they could use money to do that. And at the end here, at the end of 26, to remember it's not to be abused too. And that's what, if you're in the New Testament, we'll find out that's where Jesus had a problem with them, because they were buying stuff cheap, reselling it at a higher rate at the temple. And so even with that right there is a potential for corruption to be in the future right there. So God, God's telling them how this is and how it's supposed to be, and watch out for problems in the future. So, all right, so I'm going to cut it off. Right. I'll finish up next week. There's just a little bit left there.